Chris Creever was driving home from work on a dark, rainy evening in Pennsylvania. As he turned onto a deserted road that cut through a thick forest, he began to feel uneasy. The trees seemed to close in on him, casting eerie shadows on the road. He had heard rumors of strange sightings in the area, but he dismissed them as mere superstitions. As he drove deeper into the woods, the rain grew heavier, battering against his windshield. Suddenly, something caught his eye. A figure emerging from the trees ahead. It was dressed in a long white gown, tattered and stained with dirt. Chris's heart raced as the figure moved slowly towards his car. He tried to speed away, but the figure seemed to follow him, its ghostly face illuminated by the headlights. Chris could see that its eyes were sunken and its skin was pale and lifeless. The figure tapped on the window, whispering incoherently. Chris's hands shook as he fumbled for the keys, but the car wouldn't start. The figure continued to tap on the window, its bony hand leaving smudges on the glass. Chris could hear its ragged breaths and a faint moaning that seemed to come from deep within the forest. He felt trapped, helpless, as if he had stumbled into a nightmare. Suddenly, the figure vanished, leaving Chris alone in the car. He sat there for a few moments, his heart pounding, his mind racing. He knew he had to get out of there, but his hands were shaking so badly that he could hardly grip the steering wheel. When he finally made it home, he couldn't shake off the feeling of dread that lingered in his mind. He decided to do some research and discovered that the area where he had seen the ghostly figure was once the site of an old mental asylum that had been closed for decades. The patients had been mistreated and left to die in the woods, and their tormented spirits were said to haunt the area to this day. Chris's experience has since been widely reported, with many people claiming to have seen similar ghostly figures in the same area. The woods in Pennsylvania hold a certain spooky mystery that still sends shivers down the spines of those who dare to venture there. In the summer of 1984, a family of 4 moved into a beautiful, old Victorian mansion in a small town in upstate New York. They had been searching for a new home for months, and when they saw the house, they knew it was the one. The mansion was breathtaking, with its ornate woodwork, stained glass windows, and sprawling gardens. They were immediately charmed by the place and signed the papers without hesitation. As they settled into their new home, they noticed some odd things happening. Doors would creak open on their own, lights would flicker, and strange noises would echo through the halls. They brushed it off as the typical quirks of an old house and went about their lives. But as time went on, the occurrences grew more frequent and more sinister. The family began to feel as if they were being watched, as if someone or something was always lurking in the shadows. They heard voices whispering in the night, and footsteps echoing in the halls. The children were frightened and begged their parents to leave the house, but the parents were determined to make it work. One night, the family was awakened by a loud crash in the kitchen. When they went to investigate, they found that every dish and glass in the cupboards had been shattered, as if someone had hurled them to the ground. Another time, they discovered a message scrawled on the wall in red paint: "Get out." As the months went on, the occurrences grew more violent. The family's young daughter began having nightmares about a dark figure that would come to her at night. She would wake up screaming and shaking, claiming that the figure was trying to take her away. One night, the family was awakened by a blood-curdling scream coming from the basement. When they went to investigate, they found that their son had been thrown across the room by an unseen force. His arms and legs were scratched and bruised, as if someone had attacked him. The family tried everything they could think of to rid the house of the presence that seemed to be tormenting them. They hired a team of paranormal investigators who conducted a series of seances and investigations, but they were unable to explain the strange occurrences. In fact, the more they dug into the history of the house, the more they realized that there was a dark and tragic past hidden within its walls. It turned out that the house had once been owned by a wealthy family who had suffered a terrible tragedy. Their youngest daughter had died in a freak accident, and they had been forced to sell the house to pay off their debts. The family that had moved in after them had also experienced strange occurrences, and they had left the house in a hurry, never to return. Finally, the family could take it no longer. They packed up their belongings and fled the house, leaving behind the nightmare that had consumed their lives. They never returned to the house again, and it remained abandoned for years. To this day, the house remains a mystery, with many claiming that it is haunted by the spirits of its past occupants. Some say that the spirits of the family who once lived there are still trapped within its walls, unable to move on. Others claim that there is something more sinister lurking in the shadows, something that has been waiting for its next victim to arrive. Whether or not the stories are true, one thing is certain. The old Victorian mansion in upstate New York holds a certain dark and eerie presence that still sends shivers down the spines of those who dare to venture near it. In the mid-2000s, a family of 4 moved into a historic home in a small town in the Midwest. The house was over a century old and had been beautifully restored to its former glory. It had been on the market for years, with no one daring to purchase it due to rumors of strange occurrences and a dark history. But the family fell in love with the house and its old-world charm and decided to make it their own. At first, everything was perfect. They marveled at the intricate details in the woodwork, the stained glass windows, and the elegant staircase. They enjoyed hosting parties and inviting friends over to see their beautiful new home. However, they soon began to notice some odd things happening. The family would hear footsteps pacing back and forth in the hallways at night. Doors would slam shut on their own, and they would hear disembodied whispers in the dead of night. They found that the electricity would go out at the most inconvenient times, and that some of their appliances would turn on by themselves. At first, the family dismissed the occurrences as the typical quirks of an old house. But as time went on, the occurrences became more frequent and more terrifying. One night, the family was awakened by the sound of shattering glass. They rushed to the living room to find that all the picture frames on the walls had been thrown to the floor, as if someone had hurled them with great force. Another time, they heard the sound of a woman weeping softly in the corner of the room, but when they turned on the light, no one was there. The family's daughter, who was 8 at the time, started having recurring nightmares. She would wake up in the middle of the night, screaming and crying, claiming that she had seen a figure standing at the foot of her bed. She described the figure as a dark, shadowy form, with glowing red eyes that seemed to stare right through her. The family contacted a paranormal investigation team to investigate the strange occurrences. The investigators found that the house had a dark and troubled past. It turned out that the house had been used as a makeshift hospital during a deadly outbreak of a contagious disease that swept through the town in the early 20th century. Many people had died in the house during that time, and their spirits were said to haunt the place. The investigation team conducted a series of seances and cleansings to try to rid the house of the restless spirits, but their efforts were in vain. In fact, the more they tried to exorcise the house, the more violent and terrifying the occurrences became. The family was left feeling trapped and tormented in their own home. The family eventually decided to leave the house and move to a new town. They left behind the house and its troubled history, but they were never able to forget the terrifying experiences that they had endured. To this day, the house remains empty, with many people in the town claiming that it is haunted by the spirits of the past. The legend of the haunted house has become a local legend, with many people curious about the dark history that lurks within its walls. Despite the family's departure, the house still stands as a reminder of the horrors that can be hidden within the shadows of even the most beautiful homes.